The sky hasn't been blue in years. Now it hangs heavy above us as a bruised bruise of orange and crimson, as if the sun itself has bled into the atmosphere. I can hear the static in my headset crackle with each gust of hot, acrid wind rattling the metal shingles above my makeshift studio. Ordinary things, the sound of children laughing, the hum of traffic, have been replaced by a relentless, low-frequency groan of machinery pushing too hard against a world that no longer offers relief. Out. The one cracked window, I see what was once a greenbelt park, a place where families picnicked and lovers whispered under ancient oaks. Now it's a dust bowl. The grass, bleached to straw, lies like a sickly quilt across the ground. The trees stand like skeletons, half their branches stripped of leaves by relentless storms. Every now and then, a tumbleweed bleeds across the cracked asphalt, spinning through the air like a ghost lost in time. In the distance, the rusted skeleton of the old radio tower still leans defiantly, though its signal is all I have left. Water is death here. The drought that started 8 summers ago never ended. It just got worse. Rivers evaporated into nothing more than ragged scars on the earth. Reservoirs, once brimming with promise, have shrunk into chalky craters. I remember driving through town last week and coming upon a cracked riverbed where children used to fish. Their rods now lie abandoned in the dust, tangled in broken nets. A sign reading, "Welcome to Riverside," wavers on a single post. It's ironic if it weren't. So tragic. Down Main Street, half the buildings have collapsed inward. Their facades peeled back like rotten fruit. The bank vault remains, its doors still locked, its steel walls defying time. But what's the point of guarded treasure when coins are worthless and shelves are empty? The grocery store shelves lie in ruin, cages of dried pasta, cans twisted, opened by scavengers, and a single half-full bottle of ibuprofen that I pocketed weeks ago to ease my aching skull. Even medicine is a relic now, traded like gold among the few who remember what it once was. There are no more police patrols, no paramedics, no firefighters. The government we once knew has fractured into splinter cells, each hoarding supplies and territory. Some call themselves the Northern Coalition, a ragtag militia controlling what little fresh water remains in the old municipal treatment plant. Others, the Dust Brotherhood, roam the wastelands in patched-up trucks, guns mounted on bed frames, demanding tribute in supplies or fuel. We've learned to keep our distance, to negotiate only through bartered radio channels. The radio station, where I broadcast, is powered by a battered old generator. Enough to keep these frequencies alive, but barely. Every night I climb out onto the roof and pour a thin film of oil into the engine, whisper to it like a prayer. If it dies, so does the only thread that binds you to me, and the only hope I can send across the static waves. In the distance, I catch the flicker of cooking fires, a signal that someone's out there scavenging the ruins of a collapsed world. They might be friendly, or desperate enough to kill for a can of beans. At dusk, silhouettes move in broken harmony, hunched against the heat, weighed down by packs filled with the remnants of yesterday. No one farms anymore. The soil is sterile. No one harvests. The sun's glare bakes it to dust. The only green left are the invasive, thorny vines that coil around abandoned buildings, as if nature itself is strangling the last vestiges of humanity's pride. Every so often, a firestorm rages through these vines, sparks carried by gale-force winds, reducing structures to ash in minutes. The air tastes of smoke and iron. Yet in this barren mosaic, humanity persists. Small clusters of survivors have set up camps in the basements of hollowed-out office blocks. Windows boarded with corrugated metal, doors bolted with scavenged car parts. Children, their faces streaked with grime, chase each other in the dim halls, their laughter a fragile echo of a world that once was. You hear it, and for a moment you remember what life felt like. Institutions have collapsed, but not completely vanished. A few serum labs still operate in hidden bunkers. Doctors who refuse to abandon their oath, stitching wounds and brewing antiseptics from what little raw materials remain. I've wired their coordinates into my logs. Every now and then I see a faint call sign on my dial, but to reach them means crossing territories held by those who see medicine as power. The horizon is an unbroken line of haze and ruin. Every sunrise brings another blast of heat. Every sunset fades into a night so cold, your bones ache. There is no morning dew, no evening breeze, only extremes. The planet swings between fever and frost, and we cling to life somewhere in the middle. This is the world as it stands now, broken, bleeding, uncertain. There are no safe roads, no rest stops, no landmarks you can trust. The sky's color shifts with the solar flares that black out entire regions. Then, for days, all we have is darkness and the hum of generators. You tune in partly to hear my voice, partly to remind yourself that you're not alone. Stay close to your radio. I'll keep broadcasting. I'll paint this skyline with words, carry your fears and hopes through the haze. And maybe, just maybe, together we'll find a way to keep breathing under this angry sky. I'm the one you hear each evening when the sun's last embers fade into that bruised sky. They call me Marisol Vega, though in this new world names have lost some of their meaning. Still, it's what I answer to when I climb onto the roof and fire up the generator. Radio waves are my lifeline, and you're my reason for keeping it alive. Before everything fell apart, I was a climate researcher at a modest university lab. I spent my days analyzing temperature data, modeling flood patterns, and warning anyone who'd listen that our planet was tipping. Nobody paid attention until the rivers dried up and the wildfires crept to city limits. When the blackout hit, solar flares frying power grids from coast to coast, I lost my lab, my home, and with them, the structure that gave my life meaning. Now, my shelter is a single-story brick building once used as a community center. Its windows are boarded, its doors reinforced with steel plating salvaged from a hardware store looted long ago. Behind this fortress of bricks and scrap metal, I've carved out a space to broadcast. A battered desk, a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and a dynamic microphone stand between me and the static. Every night I settle into a rickety chair that creaks under my weight and push the mic forward. Surviving is a balancing act of resource scavenging and strict routines. Each morning, I venture out into the wasteland wearing a dust mask and goggles, stained with sweat. I follow the old delivery routes, streets once bustling with trucks and buses, now dotted with overturned cars, piles of debris, and the occasional overturned water tanker, long since emptied. I carry a duffel bag stocked with empty water pouches, crude filters, and a handful of nutrient bars that taste like sawdust, but keep me going. I've learned how to nurse every drop, capturing condensation off metal rooftops at dawn, tending to a small hydroponic rig cobbled together from PVC pipes and grow lights powered by my generator. The greens it yields, mutant pale lettuce and spindly microgreens, are the only fresh food I've tasted since the supermarkets shut their doors for good. In its own way, that tiny garden is a miracle, but it isn't just survival that drives me. It's the voices on the other end of the dial. The lone farmer in Nebraska still coaxing tomatoes from dead soil. The father in Arizona teaching his children to read by the light of a makeshift lantern. The engineer in Detroit tinkering with wind turbines he's jury-rigged from broken fans. Every call reminds me that we're more than isolated souls. We're threads in a tattered tapestry still holding together. I lost my family in the chaos. My brother, Raphael, refused to leave the city when the blackouts began. He said he'd wait for the government to fix things, that the storm would pass. I begged him to come west with me. Instead, I found his empty apartment 6 weeks later. Windows smashed, hearth cold, and no sign he ever made it out alive. My parents passed before the worst hit. My mother a stroke triggered by stress. My father a heart attack he couldn't afford to treat once hospitals collapsed. I carry their photos in a Ziploc. A faded wedding portrait, my mother's bright smile, my father's stern grip on my shoulder. I carry them with me, even though tears burn when I look. Some nights after I sign off, I wander the hallways of this old center, listening to the hum of the generator and the soft creaks in the rafters. I wonder if I'm losing my mind, imagining footsteps in the dark. But mostly, I remind myself that I'm alive, that breathing, even when it tastes of dust, is enough reason to keep going. Every broadcast begins the same way, a crackle of static. Then my voice, worn but steady, introducing myself and checking in. Good evening, survivors. This is Marisol on Channel 7. Signal strength 5-2. If you can hear me, you're not alone. I give updates on solar flare activity, predicted bursts that might knock us offline, then share whatever information I've scavenged. The location of a hidden spring a group of scouts discovered near the old mill, or a weather reading indicating a rare chance of rain in the Midwest. I read letters that arrive on battered tapes, requests for help, words of encouragement, stray poetry scribbled on scraps of paper. Responsibility sits heavy on my shoulders. A single mistake, an overlooked generator leak, an inaccurate reading of radiation levels could cost lives. So I double-check every datum, calibrate my instruments daily, and keep meticulous logs. My only audience for now is a web of radios strung across the wasteland. But one day I hope my signal will reach the coast again, or cross the mountains to regions that haven't collapsed as completely. Hope is a fragile thing, but it's a thing we must guard. I don't pretend to be a hero. I'm not armed like the militias, and I don't lead a caravan of survivors. I'm just a voice, a record keeper, a woman who refused to stop talking when everyone else went silent. Each time I broadcast, I'm defying the darkness. Each night I relight the generator. I'm choosing life over surrender. Sometimes I imagine what it must feel like to be heard by someone who needs nothing more than a familiar voice to make it through another night. I replay that moment before I sleep, the final tone of the sign-off, the cafe chatter of distant radios, and then the hum settling into a quiet lull. It's in that silence that my heart beats the loudest, reminding me that somewhere, someone is listening, and so I remain. Marisol Vega, scientist turned survivor, broadcaster turned beacon. In a world reduced to dust and decay, I cling to my radio waves like lifelines, weaving a tapestry of connection where before there was only brokenness. My losses are deep, my struggle is endless. But as long as this voice reaches beyond these boarded walls, hope will glimmer in the static and we will endure. Together I switch on the recorder and lean into the mic as the last whispers of static fade. Tonight I need to tell you exactly what we're up against, because survival is slipping through our fingers faster than we can admit. The crisis we face isn't just another drought or another wildfire. It's all of it, colliding at once. Decades of climate neglect climaxing in brutal extremes, layered on top of geomagnetic chaos that's ripping our power grids to shreds. Every day becomes another test. Sometimes I wonder which weight will break us first, the unrelenting heat or the darkness that follows. A month ago, the sun unleashed a coronal mass ejection the size of Jupiter. In minutes, Earth's magnetosphere shuddered under a violent geomagnetic storm. Transformers melted, substations exploded, and entire regional grids collapsed. We lost California, Texas, the Midwest. Areas that once powered the country plunged into silence. No lights, no clean water, no communications. Even now, our generator sputters and coughs every night to keep this station alive. And I ration its fuel like I ration my own breath. Before the blackout, we were starving, but had hoped that relief might come. Evacuation convoys, aid shipments, government relief programs. They were all wiped out by the EMP-like surge. Now, day 34 of living off-grid, we clang through survival with jury-rigged solutions that wear out as fast as we can patch them. Wells we once drilled have gone dry. The few pumps still working run on stolen solar panels scavenged from shuttered hospitals. I scavenged 3 panels last week, enough for one water pump to run at night, but not enough to run the fridge we don't have. Meanwhile, the climate continues to swing like a pendulum gone mad. Temperatures exceed 125 degrees in the southern deserts by noon. Nights drop to 40 degrees and or below in the Rockies. The heat dome stretching from Phoenix to Albuquerque has baked the land so hard that roads bubble and tar melts. In the Northeast, we're seeing record heat drought where humidity hovers around 10%. Dust storms rivaling those of the Dust Bowl sweep across once lush cornfields, and the Ohio River is nothing more than mud. Tornadoes twist through parched, Planes, their winds fueled by temperature differentials so extreme they're unpredictable. Without power, most institutions have crumbled. Hospitals operate as field clinics with hand-cranked ventilators. Pharmacies dispense outdated antibiotics, and nothing for chronic conditions like diabetes. Farmers have become water merchants, trading plastic bottles for seeds and ammo. Militias patrol the ruins of federal buildings, enforcing edicts via radio. Curfews, ration limits, and checkpoints. Even speaking of government feels archaic. The closest thing we have are battle-scarred warlords with walkie-talkies. Water, our most precious resource, is harder to find than hope. My own hydroponic rig yields enough greens for one meal every 3 days. I survive on dehydrated bars that cost me 2 liters of filtered water each to swallow. Fuel for the generator comes from looted gas stations. I haul 20-gallon drums on a cart salvaged from a supermarket loading dock. Last week, a rival group ambushed me and stole my entire stash. I narrowly escaped on foot under an orange sky. Here's the hard truth. The solar flare didn't just black out our power, it supercharged our atmosphere, flooding it with charged particles that strip away ozone and distort weather systems. Without our electromagnetic shields, high-energy protons are cooking the upper atmosphere, creating heat pockets that intensify storms. The jet stream has snapped into chaotic loops, dragging Arctic air down to the Gulf Coast one day and pushing Saharan dust across the Atlantic the next. That's why you saw snow in Georgia and haboobs over New York. From my notes, geomagnetic K-index peaked at 9 on May 3rd, indicating extreme storm conditions. Global average temperature for April was 2.4 degrees Celsius above the 20th century mean, our hottest on record. Soil moisture in key agricultural zones is below 5%, compared to a healthy 20-25%. I keep these figures close because understanding the mechanics can buy us precious hours to prepare. When I vent to callers, I tell them, brace for the next geomagnetic spike. Unplug all electronics, ground your equipment, and switch to battery-only mode. Wrap radios and solar charge controllers in aluminum foil and store them in grounded metal boxes. Use black plastic sheeting over raised soil. Beds to condense dew at night. Squeeze the trapped moisture into collection tubes. Create evaporative coolers by circulating air through wet burlap sacks. Greatly reduces interior temps when powered by a small solar fan. Fit your masks with layers of furnace filter material to block dust. And if toxic rain falls from atmospheric chemicals, add activated charcoal. These measures aren't glamorous, and many of them fail under extreme conditions. But they can extend survival by days, maybe weeks. Days that might be the difference between life and death. Every night, I log my generator's fuel consumption down to 2 decimal precision. I calculate reserve margins, factoring in temperature extremes that sap battery efficiency. I scan the skies for auroras, signs of another solar assault, and cross-reference with NOAA reads I'm still able to pull via homemade dipole antennas. But the forecasts are grim. More flares expected, and a heat dome building over the central. Plains that could last another month. Water truckers tell me springs in Colorado have gone toxic from mineral leaching. Scavenger bands get livid over rumors of a working dam near what used to be Cheyenne. The crisis is relentless. Heat, drought, storms, and blackouts in an unholy alliance, chipping away at body and spirit. Every scrap of knowledge, every bit of gear, every ally we can trust becomes a lifeline. I cling to my role as the voice in the dark, not because I'm especially brave, but because if I stop, the static will swallow our frail connections whole. Tonight, I'm asking you to listen. Share your tips, broadcast your own readings, and keep the channels open. Map your water sources. Test your soil. Reinforce your shelters. We may be scattered pockets of survivors, but together we form a network. One that can endure if we pool our science, our grit, and our hope. Because the storm isn't going away. The heat isn't relenting. But knowledge is power, and connection is our last refuge. Stay alive. Stay tuned. I'll be here tomorrow, or as long as I can find the fuel to keep this signal flickering against the dark. The air tonight is different. Thicker, crackling with static and charged particles that set my teeth on edge. I wipe my goggles clean. but the haze still clings to the lenses. It's not just dust anymore. It's the fallout from the last geomagnetic surge, mingled with ash from 1,000 burn scars across the landscape. Every breath feels like I'm dragging grit through my lungs. I've been rationing water down to half liters per day for weeks. My hydroponic rig coughs out a handful of limp microgreens every fourth morning. Nothing more. Yesterday's scavenging. Run turned up a collapsed water tower at the edge of town. Graffiti-scarred steel now perforated by corrosion. I saw a pool of rust-colored sludge at its base, half filled with algae. I dipped a sample into my filter and tasted it. Bitter. Copper and decay. I left it, but I heard the murmurs of others in the distance, their voices desperate, hungry for any drop. Fuel is even worse. The generator sputters if I give it more than 5 minutes at a time. Each burst guzzles more gas than I can afford. Last week, I scavenged an old service station hidden behind overgrown vines. 3 barrels still held the leavings of a bygone world. Half-used diesel, the rest waterlogged. I siphoned what I could into my jerry cans, but I left 2 behind. More than enough to draw attention. Their beds rigged with homemade turrets fashioned from pipe and motor mounts. The Dust Brotherhood, notorious for territory raids and fuel extortion. They rolled through the outskirts in a haze of dust, their engines growling over the abraded landscape. I wanted to bolt back inside, lock every door, but something held me frozen. Maybe the disbelief that this threat could still reach me here. They parked 4 vehicles in a loose semicircle around the building and stepped out, boots crunching on cracked concrete. I slipped upstairs to the broadcast booth, heart pounding in my throat, and whispered into the mic. Channel 7 to all listeners. Drones approaching from the southeast. Take cover, secure your shelters, and be ready to defend. My voice felt small, swallowed by the roar outside. I braced the door with a steel beam and watched through the peephole as they fanned out, rifles raised. One of them, tall, lean bandana over his mouth, waved a hand and shouted something I couldn't make out. I ducked behind the desk, counting the seconds between engine roars and distant thunder. No storm was predicted. There's never enough moisture for real thunder. But tonight the sky crackled with electric energy that danced on the horizon. Then something shifted. A horn blast, sharp, single. Not from their vehicles, but from the opposite street. The raiders swiveled, spines stiffening. Moments later, a battered school bus lurched into view, headlights kicking up dust and ground to a stop beside the convoy. A woman climbed out, shoulder-length hair tied back with cloth, goggles perched on her forehead. She carried something metallic and rectangular in her arms. "Drop your weapons," she called, voice clear across the static. "I have what you need." The raider leader frowned, then signaled 2 others to flank her. My pulse rebelled. Any rescue scenario like this usually ended with the newcomer shot for supplies. But she stood her ground, fingers brushing the object as if willing it to work. In that moment, I made a choice. If the raiders took her tech, they'd return with it and target me next. But if I helped her, maybe I could broker a truce. I flipped the switch on my studio's amplifier, sending my voice booming into the street. "Dust Brotherhood. This is a broadcast station. You're on live air. Any violence here and every survivor within 5 miles will know your faces." Silence. The raiders craned their necks, uneasy under the unseen glare of 100 hidden radios. The woman seized. The pause. She stepped forward, shoved the device, a solar-powered water purifier, toward the raiders. The leader's eyes flicked to my mic, then back to her. He barked an order, and 2 men tore the purifier away, ripping open the case. "Where'd you get this?" he demanded. She smiled, bruised but defiant. "From a community up north, Mountain Springs. They cracked the code on solar-driven electrolysis. You can run it on 2 hours of direct sunlight and a 5-gallon drum of brackish water. It outputs 5 liters of purified H2O. Something in the raider's posture shifted. He gestured to his men to lower their guns. I opened the booth door a crack. Dust motes danced in the yellow glow of a single lamp. My heart threatened to sprint out of my chest. The woman met my eyes. For the first time, I saw her fear. The knowledge that even this fragile hope could die in an instant. Before I had a chance to intervene, the sky above split with a jagged crack of light. No thunder, just a raw electric scream. The raiders yelped and scattered as a shockwave rattled through the asphalt, sending pebbles skittering like marbles. Roof tiles shuddered. The old generator in the corner groaned, then died. Blackness swallowed the room. Only the hushed breaths of hostiles, refugees, and one broadcaster broke the void. Then the hiss of rain, acidic, glowing faintly in the flashes of coronal energy above. Toxic rain is a misnomer. It's electrically charged particles combining with residual pollutants, creating droplets that burn skin and corrode metal. Raider boots slipped on the damp floor as they backed toward their trucks. The leader cursed, pressed a handkerchief to his cheek, bleeding from a tiny cut. "Fall back," he barked, voice tinny in the gloom. They piled into the trucks, doors slamming shut. Engines sputtered to life, struggles against a sky gone mad. Moments later they were gone, leaving the bus and its driver stranded in the rain. I slipped from the booth, pulled her inside, and fortified the door. Why help them? I shouted over the storm. She shook her head, drenched and trembling. Because if they get this tech and lock it behind guns, everyone else dies. As thunderless lightning painted the walls, she unpacked a tattered journal. Inside, schematics scribbled with a scientist's precision. Diagrams of photovoltaic arrays linked to a water-cracking module. Electrodes carved from reclaimed platinum contacts. Instructions to build a basic reactor. Mountain Springs, she whispered. A former nuclear research facility in Colorado. When the world went dark, a group of engineers and retirees, people with nothing left to lose, stockpiled solar panels in the old parking lot. They tapped an aquifer deep beneath the Rockies. They've been refining this purifier in secret. A glimmer of hope flared in my chest, and fizzled just as quickly when I thought of the journey. Colorado was 1,000 miles north, across territories patrolled by militias and sandstorms that could strip flesh from bone. Getting there meant risking everything. As the rain hissed, I sank to the floor, journal open in my lap. I could almost feel the cold mountain water running across my tongue, the weight of fresh supplies filling my arms. I could hear the crackle of my mic, delivering good news instead of warnings. But I've faced betrayal before. My own loss taught me that hope often dies when reality hits. What if Mountain Springs is a myth, and the journal is a trap to lead desperate souls into an ambush? What if I share this with you? Send a convoy eastward and they never return. My hand hovered over the mic switch. I closed my eyes and pictured my parents, my mother's gentle laugh as she tended the garden, my father's stern yet proud nod. When I presented my first research paper, I thought of Raphael, waiting for rescue that never came. I thought of every lonely caller who tuned in just to hear a human voice. I couldn't turn away. Not now. If Mountain Springs is real, it could reshape the fate of countless survivors. And if it's not, then at least we tried. I reached for the journal and the purifier's case, slinging my pack over one shoulder. "We're going," I said, voice steady despite the adrenaline. The woman nodded, relief washing over her exhaustion. Together we emerged into the neon drizzle. The raiders' convoy was a fading silhouette, its retreating taillights swallowed by the storm. The school bus creaked to life on its ancient generator, enough to make it to the edge of town before its engine seizes. I keyed the mic one last time. Channel 7 to all listeners. Pack your essentials. We're heading out at first light. If you can travel, come with us. We chase Mountain Springs. Hope rides on this. The storm raged on, but inside me, a calm pulse thrummed. The crisis had escalated. Resources were vanishing, raiders circling like vultures, and the weather had joined the hunt. But buried in the chaos was a rumor, a chance at something better. I clipped the journal to my belt, secured the purifier on my back, and took a deep breath. The path ahead was fraught with danger, and trust would have to be earned every step of the way. But for the first time in months, I felt my heart leap at the prospect of discovery rather than dread. Tomorrow, we chase a legend. And if we find it, maybe the world will remember what hope looks like. Dawn arrived in a wash of sickly yellow light, filtered through clouds the color of bruised metal. I stood at the wheel of the battered school bus, hands trembling around the steering column, watching the horizon for any sign of life or death. Beside me, the engineer who'd risked everything to bring the Mountain Springs purifier rubbed sleep from her eyes and checked her wrist-worn gauge. Battery charge at 37%. Water. Reserves at 12 liters. Fuel for maybe 50 miles. 48 hours ago, we still had a choice. Now, every mile meant crossing razor-thin margins. We crested a low ridge and saw it. The jagged outline of the Rockies etched like broken teeth against the sky. Between us and those peaks lay 1,000 miles of desolation. Barren fields baked, white towns half buried in sand, and the ghost skeletons of interstate highways. But beyond those mountains, according to the journal, lay a cavern deep enough to tap a cold aquifer, untouched by drought. It was our singular hope, a source of water so pure, it needed only the purifier's electrolysis to make it drinkable. If the legend held true, Mountain Springs could be the seed of rebirth. We navigated the bus onto an old service road, its asphalt riddled with potholes that jutted the chassis like broken teeth. The engine coughed itself awake and carried us forward. I reached over to secure the purifier's case, its steel shell still unfamiliar in my hands. Inside were electrodes etched with platinum strips, a small solar array no bigger than a car battery, and circuitry too refined for a world gone feral. This device existed because someone in that hidden community refused to let humanity die. 3 hours later, the service road ended at the mouth of a narrow canyon. The walls rose in steep arcs of sun-bleached granite, furrowed by ancient glaciers. A ribbon of sand snaked between them. The bed of a river that last flowed when I was a child. A single, rusted footbridge arched across the gap, its railings curled like the rib bones of a giant. Beneath, the canyon mouth yawned in shadow. We parked the bus as far off to the side as we could and stepped out into the hush. The air was colder here, tinged with a dampness I hadn't felt in months. We carried the purifier down to the canyon floor and set it on a ledge of stone. The engineer, whose name I'd never learned, calling herself Ray when we first met, unstrapped her pack and began unpacking coils of tubing, a fold-out solar panel, and a tethered battery bank. Depth. Gauge reads negative 90 feet, she whispered. The journal says the chamber is another 100 feet down. Once we power up, water should seep in through the intake valves. I knelt beside her, heart thundering. And if it doesn't? She met my eyes, fatigue and fierce determination warring in her gaze. Then we've come this far for nothing. But if it works... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Hope hung between us, fragile as a soap bubble. With trembling fingers, she latched the solar panel to the top of the purifier. I adjusted the angle toward the sliver of sun that filtered through the canyon's throat. A soft hum began, a low whir that vibrated through the stones beneath our knees. The charging gauge flickered upward. 10%, 20, 30. Then came the rattle of shifting rock. The canyon walls had ears, cracks so deep that sunlight dappled the stones like lightning. Dust plumed behind us. A tremor ran through the earth, as though the mountain itself were inhaling. I caught Ray's arm. "Gravity's shifting," I said, voice tight. She didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the purifier's display. At 55%, the humming grew louder, an electric heartbeat in the stone. At 70%, the ground rumbled. Then, in a final pulse of light, the gauge hit 100, and the hum became a roar. A surge of clear, cold water, black in the dim canyon light, gushed from the intake valve into a collection tray. My breath hitched. I crouched to peer over. The ledge. Water cascaded down the face of the purifier, spilling into a shallow pool carved into the sandstone. But just as quickly as it appeared, the stream sputtered. The roar became a wheeze. The panel's light dimmed. The battery bank's final cell drained. Ray cursed under her breath and flipped a switch on the control module. For a heartbeat, the flow steadied. Then it stopped again. I glanced at the canyon roof, where cracks had widened under the added vibration. Pebbles dislodged and tumbled down with hollow clacks. We'd triggered something fragile. "Ray, we've got to shut it down," I said, voice urgent. "This place might collapse." She hesitated, lips pressed in a line of stubborn faith, then snapped off the circuit. The hum died. The canyon fell silent, save for the distant groan of shifting stone. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, far above, a boulder the size of a car sheared loose and slammed onto the footbridge, splitting its wooden planks in two. A cloud of dust billowed. My vision blurred as grit filled my eyes. I coughed, stumbled backward, and grabbed the purifier's case. "Ray!" I hissed. She hurled herself at me, slinging the device over her shoulder. Together, we sprinted down the service road as the canyon mouth drummed with the thunder of collapse. The bus's engine kicked over under my hand, and we roared away. Just as the footbridge finally let go, plunging into the darkness below, our hearts pounded and sweat coursed down my spine despite the chill. I drove in silence, grappling with what we'd just survived and what it meant. We'd found water, but not enough. The purifier hadn't powered long enough to tap the full aquifer, and the canyon was unstable. We could never return here without risking entombment. That night, we reflected by the flickering lantern in an abandoned ranger station that had somehow survived the solar pulse. Dry maps peeled from the walls, and the remnants of a wooden desk were scattered with rusted artifacts. Old binoculars, a compass with no needle, and a logbook whose pages were warped by humidity. I thumbed through it and found a crudely drawn topo map of the canyon, with a scribble marking solar shaft further up the ridge. An exposed cleft where sunlight filtered straight into the rock chamber. "You see this?" I said, pointing. "If we haul the purifier up there, we could get full sun. But it's a mile hike, up a slope so steep it's barely a goat path." Ray's face paled. "We don't have the energy for that." I closed my eyes, thinking of every survivor who'd relied on that purifier, every caller who'd pinned their hopes on Mountain Springs. I thought of my parents' photos, of Raphael's empty apartment. And I thought of the countless pockets of humanity out there, hungry, thirsty, listening tonight for a miracle. "We do," I said quietly. "Because if we don't, none of us make it." In that moment, I felt the full weight of leadership smash into me. I wasn't just a radio voice anymore. I was a bearer of fate. To lead is to choose. Even when every option feels like a knife's edge by first light, we gathered our gear. I strapped the purifier case to a makeshift sled fashioned from bent metal panels. Ray carried extra battery packs, filters, and enough water for the climb. We set out across the night-baked ground, every step a trial. The slope rose steeply and the air thinned. Each labored breath felt like inhaling fire. Dust devils spiraled around us, painting the sky in roiling brown columns. Halfway up, Ray's boots slipped on loose scree. She tumbled, a spray of rocks clacking behind her. I skidded to a halt and grabbed her arm, hauling her upright. Her eyes shimmered with tears of pain and frustration. "Keep going," I urged. "We're almost there." She nodded, steeling herself, and we pressed on. At the final switchback, the shaft yawned like a sluice gate cut in stone. A 3-foot gap in the canyon rim, where sunlight poured in like liquid gold. We dragged the purifier into the beam, hearts pounding. "Plug it in now," I said. Ray connected the panel to the input port and calibrated the angle. I held my breath as the display blinked awake. The hum started low, then rose in a crescendo as the panel caught the full force of the morning sun. A ribbon of water shot from the intake into the filtration chamber, a steady, unbroken stream of crystal-clear liquid. I pressed my palm beneath the spout and felt the cold shock of life itself. Tears slipped down Ray's cheeks. "We did it," she whispered. I exhaled, tension draining from my shoulders like steam. In that instant, the ravaged world beyond the shaft faded away. All that mattered was the drop of water, pure and free, but triumph came at a price. The purifier pulled water so fast that the intake gurgled with strain. The canyon walls trembled. A rumble threatened from below, signs that the chamber's structural integrity was failing. Again, the Earth threatened to swallow us. We had to make a choice: stay and gather every liter we could risk, or retreat with what we'd already extracted. He glanced at Ray, whose gaunt face was illuminated by the golden shaft. Behind us, the sky darkened as a bank of charged clouds gathered. Another solar flare in the making, or the start of a rain of toxic droplets. We'd only minutes. I thought of every survivor who'd pinned their hope on us. I thought of the water's value against the threat of collapse. And I realized, sacrifice isn't heroic if you live to regret it. Let's take what we have and go, I said firmly. We'll come back with reinforcements, stronger panels, more hands, better planning. But right now we need to live. Ray nodded, resigned and resolute. Together we capped the collection vessel, 20 liters of water. That would save dozens, and yanked the purifier free of its outlet. The hum died, and silence reigned. Behind us, the first boulder sheared from the rim and clattered down. We didn't wait to see more. We ran, sled in tow, hearts pounding as the canyon began its tremors of rupture. At the mouth, the steel footbridge. Of our hopes cracked. Another reminder that nothing built in desperation is permanent. We tumbled onto level ground as the canyon swallowed itself. Dust and stone exploded into the air, blocking out the sun. I covered my face with my sleeve and staggered forward, adrenaline and relief coursing through me. Ray's voice came through the roar, steady as the hum we'd silenced. "We did it," she shouted. "We survived." And in that moment, through the thunder of falling rock and charged dust, I understood that survival wasn't about perfect success. It was about refusing to surrender, even when the odds were impossible. We carried hope on our shoulders, a fragile ember against a sky on fire. The turning point wasn't just finding water. It was choosing life over ruin, trusting each other, and daring to believe that even in a world fractured by disaster, humanity could still find a way. As we fled the collapsing canyon, 20 liters of salvation strapped to our backs, I flipped the mics push to talk and spoke into the void. Channel 7 to all survivors. We have water. Enough to get us through. The next cycle. We're heading east. Mountain Springs is real, and we'll keep fighting to bring it to you. Hold fast. Hope flows onward. And with that, the world's hardest song began to play again. Our voices, trembling but alive, carried into the storm. Ray slumped against the seat, eyes closed. After a long moment, she spoke. "We miscalculated. The solar panel's too weak. This light, we need direct exposure, but the canyon walls block 95% of the rays." I rubbed my temples. "We need a new plan." The dust settled on the road behind us, coating my boots in a thin, pale layer that felt impossibly familiar. We'd escaped the canyon's collapse by the skin of our teeth, our sled heavy with 20 liters of water that shimmered in the afternoon, sun-like liquid promise. But as I stood there, Ray leaning against the bus, her chest heaving from the climb, hope felt at once exhilarating and fragile, like a new sprout in scorched earth. Our choice to pause the purifier early and retreat had saved our lives and secured enough water to sustain a small community for weeks. By the time we rolled into the edge of what used to be a hamlet named Pine Ridge, word of our success had spread through whispered radio reports. A group of ragtag survivors, farmers who'd harvested the last of their meager crops, engineers who'd jury-rigged wind turbines from scrap, mothers clutching children too thin for their age, greeted us with trembling relief. Their eyes, once dull with desperation, flickered with something I'd forgotten: belief. We distributed the water in rationed portions, teaching them how to run the purifier safely in direct sunlight, and demonstrating the condensation traps that could gather a liter of dew each dawn. When the first purified water dripped from the device, the group fell silent, then erupted in shouts and tears. Mothers cupped their hands to their lips. Children drank until their bellies bulged. Even the stoic men, hardened by loss and hardship, laid down their rifles to fill canteens and laugh through choked sobs. I broadcast their jubilation over Channel 7. To every listener out there, this is Marisol. Mountain Springs technology works. We have water. You can have it too. The static crackled like applause in my earpiece, but the aftermath wasn't pure triumph. The momentary calm was tempered by stark realities. Our solar panels were precious, but delicate. Dust storms could strand us at any time, and raider bands would soon hear of our water stash and come hunting. The water was a balm, not a cure. That night I sat beneath a sky tinged with the first flicker of aurora, a violet veil dancing above the distant dunes. The purified water sat in glass jars on a rickety table, catching lantern light. I poured, myself a small serving, lifted it to my lips and swallowed. A rush of cool clarity filled my senses, and I closed my eyes, letting it wash over me. It wasn't just the water. It was what it symbolized, the tangible result of knowledge, courage, and cooperation. I thought back to the moment in the canyon, where I decided to leave the purifier behind, carrying only a fraction of what we could have, sacrificing potential yield for the safety of 2 lives. In that split second, I realized leadership demands balancing risk and reward, and that a narrow escape doesn't diminish success. I'd always measured myself by what I lost: my family, my home, my old life. Now I measured myself by what I still had: a purpose, a voice, and the spark of hope I could share. Ray sat beside me, humming quietly as she cleaned the purifier's electrodes. "We did good today," she said softly. "You did good." I laid a hand on her shoulder. "We did good, but this is just the beginning." The environment around Pine Ridge bore scars too deep to ignore. Fields once planted with corn were cracked into geometric patterns of brown and gray. The riverbed nearby was a narrow trickle, its banks lined with bleached skeletons of trees that had withered under relentless sun. Yet in sheltered hollows, I saw signs of resilience. Tufts of grass had returned where runoff collected. A lone cottonwood clung to life near a seep of groundwater. A single dragonfly, its wings veined like stained glass, darted across the A. Dunes indifferent to our human dramas. When I broadcast, I highlighted these small miracles. Look for life in unexpected places. Wherever you find moisture, you'll find a chance. Even in collapse, nature pushes back. Learn from it. I shared instructions on how to identify microhabitats, rock crevices that held dew, shaded alcoves under cliffs where temperatures dropped enough for moisture to condense. Some listeners replied with their discoveries: a spring under old concrete slabs, a grove of wild grapes surviving in a concrete basin, fungal mats that filtered water through subterranean channels. But the broader picture remained dire. Dust. Storms still roamed unchecked across the plains. The solar flares continued to threaten our fragile electronics. And without concerted reforestation and policy changes, matters far beyond our immediate capacity, the climate would keep lurching toward extremes. Survival meant adaptation, not restoration. Over the next days, more survivors arrived at Pine Ridge. Families, engineers, ex-soldiers, and even former Dust Brotherhood members who'd defected after seeing what cooperation could yield. Some brought wounded trust. A handful tried to hoard water, leading to tense standoffs diffused only by radio intervention and shows of solidarity. Each new face brought stories of hardship: starving children, burned villages, lost caravans. Yet each also brought skills: a mechanic who repaired our solar arrays, a botanist who identified edible wild plants, a teacher who organized literacy classes around lantern light. One evening, a group of scouts returned from a nearby settlement to the north. They carried a slender spine of parchment, maps, data logs, and schematics from another enclave calling, itself the New Aurora Collective. According to their readings, the collective had managed to restore 50 acres of farmland using shade nets and wind traps. They'd coaxed wells back to life with deep-drilled hand pumps. And crucially, they possessed a radio array powerful enough to link multiple regions' broadcasts into a nascent network. I stared at the maps, tracing lines between communities, imagining a web of voices connecting across the wasteland. My pulse quickened. The Mountain Springs purifier had been the first thread. This network could weave a tapestry of shared knowledge, resources, and protection. It could transform isolated survival into collective resilience. That night, I returned to the broadcast booth alone. The generator hummed steadily, a sound I'd come to regard as a heartbeat. I flipped open my notebook and began scribbling a new script. But then I paused and closed my eyes. What was my true role now? Chronicler, scientist, leader? I'd started as a frightened survivor speaking into a mic. Now I was a coordinator of a growing coalition, a symbol of possibility in a broken world. Realized that survival and leadership demanded flexibility. I had to embrace uncertainty, share decisions, and empower others rather than shoulder every burden alone. The weight of that understanding was both liberating and terrifying. I switched. The mic, my voice, measured, steady, filled the empty room. Channel 7, calling all stations. We are no longer broadcasting alone. Pine Ridge is open to all who travel in peace. We have water purification plans, hydroponic blueprints, solar repair protocols, and soon, access to the new Aurora network. Together, we can rebuild local farms, secure reliable power, and defend our communities against raiders. We will not pretend the world is healed, but we can prevent further collapse. If you hear me, respond. Let us form a chain of hope across the wasteland. I signed off and leaned back. The silence was comforting, an echo of lives waiting to reply. In the days that followed, I walked through Pine Ridge's haphazard camp, greeting families, trading stories, recording their voices onto new tapes. A frail old man recited sonnets he'd memorized as a child. A mechanic showed me a windmill blade he'd fashioned from an airplane propeller. A teenage girl read her own short story about a world where rivers ran again. Each moment reinforced that our fight was for more than mere survival. It was for the continuity of culture, art, and compassion. At sunset, I often returned to the ridge overlooking the ruined riverbed. I'd sit on a shattered concrete pillar and listen to the wind snake through cracks, carrying dust and the faint scent of pine from nearby bluffs. I thought of my past life, lectures and research papers, the sterile precision of a lab, and realized those things hadn't died. They'd transformed. My work now happened in the open air, under a broken sky, where each datum could save lives. Won't pretend that everything is bright. The solar flares are gathering, the weather is more erratic than ever, and every ounce of progress must be defended against chaos. But I've learned that survival isn't a single triumph. I've had enough of those and seen them crumble. It's a series of choices, to help, to share, to believe in something larger than fear. It's acknowledging that tomorrow may bring disaster and still choosing to lay one careful stone toward rebuilding. Tonight, I prepare to send out a joint broadcast, Channel 7 linked with the new Aurora Collective. We'll share schedules for water runs, electrical repairs, seed exchanges, and defense training. We'll coordinate convoys to transport solar panels from derelict power stations to community arrays. We'll map safe passages around dust storms and raider territories. It will be messy, complicated, and dangerous, but it might just give us enough strength to withstand the next crisis. I close this entry with a glimpse of the world outside, a gray horizon where storms brew and ravens wheel overhead, where distant fires still smolder, but where the faint glow of lanterns and the hum of rehabilitated generators flicker in hidden enclaves. Our world remains broken, but in these pockets of light we find reason to keep breathing. We carry water in our hands, seeds in our pockets, and hope in our voices. The falling action isn't an end. It's the slow pivot from survival to renewal. The road ahead is long, and the next turn may yet bring collapse. But as I look out at Pine Ridge tonight, and the dozen small fires beneath a star-choked sky, I know this. We've felt hope flow through our hands, and that flow will carry us into whatever comes next. I slip the last tape into the recorder's reel and let it click home. Outside, the wind carries faint echoes of distant generators humming, of children's laughter dancing. Through the dust, small victories stitched into the fabric of this broken world. I lean back against the wooden frame of the community hall and breathe deep. tasting the tang of metal on my tongue from yesterday's excavation of an abandoned water main. It's not pure, but with charcoal filters and forward osmosis techniques, it's drinkable. Tonight, that's enough. Hope is a fragile thing, like a spider's web strung between two splintered posts. But we've learned that even the tiniest thread can hold weight. In the past week, we've seen fields coaxed back to life under shade nets, wind turbines spinning once again atop reinforced towers, and messages exchanged across hundreds of miles of radio waves. We helped a doctor revive a makeshift clinic with scavenged antibiotics. We taught a teacher how to print old textbooks from solar-charged printers. Each achievement, no matter how small, tastes like reclaimed sunlight. And yet, beneath these bright moments, the bones of catastrophe still creak. Dust storms carve new craters in the plains each dawn. Solar flares threaten to blanket us in darkness at any moment, and the next geomagnetic surge could fry our antennas beyond repair. Raiders prowl every forgotten highway, testing defenses. With calculated brutality, we carry water bottles in one hand and loaded rifles in the other, ready for both renewal and defense. The world offers us no truce. I remember my parents' garden, rows of tomatoes and basil, the sweet scent of earth after rain. I remember my brother Raphael's laugh echoing in our apartment's hallway when he surprised me with coffee mugs, labeled World's Best Sister. Those memories are both blessing and curse. They remind me of what was lost and why we fight. But I no longer allow them to chain me to grief. Instead, I let them fuel my resolve. Because if we give in to despair, the last ember dies, and with it all possibility. Tomorrow I'll wake before sunrise. I'll check the archived weather readings on our patched-together server, pull in streams from allied stations to map the next safe route, and organize a convoy to transport new solar panels scraped from the ruins of a decommissioned power plant 50 miles east. I'll teach newcomers how to harvest dew from corrugated steel roofs and how to distill juiced cactus pads into emergency water. I'll negotiate with the ex-soldiers who still guard their caches, offering purified water in exchange for safe passage. I'll remind everyone that cooperation outpaces conquest, even when conquest seems easiest. Because survival isn't a destination, it's a daily act of will. It's the gritty work of rebuilding trust where bullets once flew. It's sharing rations with a stranger whose face you can't fully trust, because someday, that stranger may save you. It's pressing play on a recorder, just to hear a human voice amid the static. It's refusing to let fear chain us to silence. I've learned that hope doesn't arrive in triumphant parades. It arrives in whispered instructions passed, between hands, in the hiss of a solar purifier coming to life, in the first tentative shoots of green poking through cracked earth. It arrives when a child sips clean water without flinching, when a teacher reads aloud by lamplight, when a radio station signs on with the greeting, "Good evening, survivors. This is Channel 7 and we have news." My final message is simple. Keep breathing. Keep sharing what you know, even if it's a single trick you've learned. Keep building, keep dreaming, and keep guarding the fragile threads of connection that bind us. Because beyond any canyon and beneath every solar flare, it's our voices, carried on wires, on tapes, on the wind, that light the way forward. Tonight, I sign off with that in mind. This is Marisol Vega, broadcasting on Channel 7. We have water, we have power, and we have each other. The road ahead is treacherous and the nights will grow darker. But as long as you can hear this voice, you are not alone. Stay alive, stay human. Speak hope into the void and it will echo back. Good night, survivors. Keep fighting for the sunrise. I pause, listening to the hollow click of the recorder finishing its cycle. Outside, the turbines turn a little. Steadier. Children's voices carry through open windows, and the horizon, though scarred, holds the promise of a new dawn. The world is still broken, but we remain. And for tonight, that is enough.